Welcome everybody to the State of Wild podcast, episode 58. And today, things are looking a little bit different. Some of you watching the video may have already noticed that our guests today are a little bit alien, a little bit different. And of course, first of all, I'm talking about MartianBuu. Martian, welcome to the State of Wild.
Greetings, thanks for having me on.
Very much happy to have you here. And of course, 2 is not, the perfect number. So of course we had to get Keith on as well as part of the show. So KeithNumbers, welcome to the State of Wild as well. Hope you're doing good.
Hello Corbett, happy to be here.
Fantastic. So first of all, just get some housekeeping stuff all out of the way. You can always, join the Patreon to support the channel, and also make sure to subscribe, like, comment, all that kind of stuff down below in the YouTube section. And anyone that does join on Patreon to support the podcast gets a whole bunch of benefits when you come join the State of the Wild Discord server. So if you're not in the Discord server and you want to come join a community that talks about Wild and all kind of stuff, make sure you do that. There's also a whole bunch of benefits going out for the Patreons very soon, so keep an eye out for that and make sure you know what you're getting there. Okay, so first of all, I feel like we should say, guys, welcome, and who are you? You sell yourself to the viewers. I'm sure a lot of people already know who exactly you guys are, but just let the people know exactly what you get up to. Marshall, let's start with you.
I am an alien streamer. I stream primarily Wild Hearthstone. That's about it.
Yep. Primarily Wild Hearthstone. Do a lot of wacky deck building. Previously, usually try and keep a mix between competitive stuff and sort of viewer decky types of things.
Yeah.
But maybe not so much nowadays.
I try to goof around as much as possible. As much as the meta will let me. And I do try to have viewers submit decks if I can, but meta's pretty oppressive these days.
Yeah. It's not. Well, we'll get into that. And Keith, what about yourself?
Hello everybody, I'm KeithNumbers. I stream exclusively Wild Hearthstone almost nightly, and I focus mostly on playing cool things that are not necessarily the best thing. We want to discover things, we want to kind of grow, engage with the community, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Viewer decks are a big part of what I do, but it's not the only thing I do, so I try to mix it up a little bit. But whatever way it is, Wild's my jam. Wild is what keeps me in Hearthstone.
Yeah.
So there you go.
That's awesome. So, let's first dive in. The expansions dropped, United and Stormwind. Now, last week we did our show. The expansion had only been out for, a few days, so when Roffle, Meowth, and I kind of went over things, it was very much in flux. We were just giving our first impressions. So things have definitely settled down, I think, a lot more, right? Things feel a lot more... everything's sort of coalesced. But overall, guys, what have been your experiences so far in this expansion? How do you feel about the meta? Basically, what do you think has been going on, and where things might be headed? I guess we're getting nerfed soon, but we'll get into that later. But yeah, what do you guys think of the expansion so far?
Feels like a lot of Dark Lair.
Yeah. I mean...
I was very, very confident that the Demon Seed quest was not going to get included in just standard Dark Lair. And I think what I failed to think about was the first aspects of the quest. I was only thinking about Blightborn Tamsin, but the quest is a 1-mana fireball that discounts your Flesh Giant twice and heals you for 6. And that's pretty good.
There were 2 aspects to the expansion, right? There's the aspect of what the Demon Seed did to the format, and then there's all the other cool things that could possibly be going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've actually seen a few neat decks pop up. You can talk about Questline Druid, you can talk about Pirate Warrior playing the quest, you can talk about Aggro Priest. There are cool things that you can do that we haven't seen before. But then you have the best deck, probably the best deck for a year straight, getting something that made it so that deck doesn't lose to 90% of what existed before. You used to be able to beat that deck with a slow deck or be able to specifically counter it. All of the weaknesses of Dark Lair have been covered. They've been patched over, right? So if you want to play a competitive deck, you either have to be playing Dark Lair or you have to be playing something tuned to beat it. And we've seen Wild formats we've seen Wild be in a state like this before, where there's an obvious best deck that's kind of broken. Everyone coalesces around it, but not quite to the same extent. It's weird. But yeah, it's not a positive place to be at all.
Yeah, something very strange about this expansion was that while Standard was highly experimental, right? There's a lot of jank going on early in the expansion for Standard. Wild very quickly became like highly focused on this one good deck, right? Like this was a very different time where usually it's jank and experimental stuff, but it was kind of just like by day 2, if that, like maybe end of day 1, it felt like everyone was just playing Dark Lair. The Warlock population is sort of nuts right now. And so I definitely feel everything you're saying there, you know, and how overall oppressive it is, because it's not like even the fact that it's just so good, because it is so good. It's an amazing deck, but it's so popular, right? Like it's just everywhere, which is not what Dark Lair was previously, right? Dark Lair was previously a pretty niche deck, even though it was, you know, quite strong. It never quite caught on to the masses the way, you know, a deck like Secret Mage has previously.
Right.
I think before you had to kind of finagle your victories with Dark Lair a little bit. You had to think about when you're going to commit your giants and what you're going to do with them. And now with the quest line, it's so inevitable that just at a certain point you win. I think it's more accessible for more people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And like I want to kind of point something out really. Like Dark Lair's never been the kind of deck that I've been particularly fond of or very good at personally. Like I know how to play it, but I've never been able to like make the magic happen like somebody in like top 10 legend or whatever would do. And like I kind of accepted that. I wasn't really interested in pushing it. But then I recently started playing a lot more of that deck. Like I built free-to-play account. And I've been playing questline Dark Lair with 4 giants for the past 3 days straight. And it feels wrong what you do to people when you play that deck. Like you don't have to like really plot things out very deeply. You just play your cards and their portrait explodes. It's great if you're into that.
Absolutely, yeah. I saw I caught a glimpse of one of your streams where I think you're like 19-0 on a free-to-play account, and I was just like, oh, those poor those poor souls, whoever you're queuing into.
I am curious now. What is my current record? Like I had to come to an early stop yesterday, but like I have a 91% win rate. Let me pull up HS replay real quick, and I'll tell you exactly where I stand with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if I don't feel like I was playing very well. I think I accidentally mulled the quest in one game.
Yeah.
Like, I just wasn't paying attention. Like I was like, hey Chad, let's kind of shoot the shit a little bit, and like I'll just do this dumb while I'm doing this in the meantime at low ranks, and like I'm just shrugging my shoulders over here. Like
yeah. So yeah, it's definitely, you know, like Warlock is the big focus, and it's so hard to sort of move beyond that. But apart from that, there has been a lot of weird stuff going on. Martian, you've personally had a lot of success with Questline Druid in particular, in addition to some other stuff. So yeah, Martian, why don't you just let it rip about Questline Druid?
Yeah, I actually came up with that while I was straight up just despairing about Warlock. I was like, what can we do? Like, what have I not tried yet? And I just typed attack into Druid and started clicking things. And I put in the quest, like the stuff that cares about you having a quest, because you start off with the quest, it lasts a while, and you have secure the deck. So the original version of the list had a lot of the, like it had Sky General Crag and the new 3-mana 3/4 that discovers something. And yeah, if you point stuff at the face while you're gaining a bunch of armor, you can beat the Seedlock pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's also the odd version of the deck, which has popped up here and there as well, which seems to be doing pretty well. From what I've seen, just on like just replay stuff, it does look like the Druid decks, either the odd or the non-odd version, are really two of the top tier decks. You know, outside Warlock, obviously, it's kind of in its own little space. So yeah, been a big surprise there. Definitely an example of one of these decks that you're talking about that has surprised and been, you know, very much against expectations. I really feel like that is the big thing from this expansion, is that whether you're talking about the seed in Warlock, which not that many people thought was going to be all that good, right? Whether you're talking about that or just a whole bunch of the other quest lines and things like that, the expansion has been highly impactful overall, a lot more than I think people anticipated.
I think even if you extract the Demon Seed, like there's still some reverberating changes, like decks like Questline Hunter, Questline Druid, like those, like Aggro Priest, like those decks aren't gonna go away if they nerf or ban Demon Seed or whatever. Like people will iterate on them, and we're gonna see them around even more. So I don't expect that to change, right? Like I think for better or worse, United and Stormwind's really changed the format.
Yeah, for sure. This is something that I brought up, I think on stream a few nights ago. I was talking about how I thought that United and Stormwind was basically kind of like Scholomance, in that it felt like a huge step forward for Wild, or maybe, step back, depending on what your viewing is. In terms of this, like, the speed of the format and how things change. In Scholomance, we got things like Polkelt, right? And we got, Darkler itself, like, we got the Darkler deck. And so everything kind of just felt different after that. And this really feels like we're in a similar situation, where I don't know... It feels like it's going to be very difficult to wrap my head around, even if there are nerfs, what the format is going to look like moving forward, right? When we're looking at things like Aggro Priest and Questline Druid, it just feels like such a dramatic shake-up. Even like Odd Hunter as well is like a completely new deck that has sort of, maintained its ability to be pretty high tier, perform really well, whereas a whole bunch of previously established archetypes have kind of dropped off a lot. So it's been very weird. And, you guys were talking about earlier, though, before the show started, about the viewer deck experience, what you guys have been able to do with viewer decks, and what the streams have been like. So both of you guys, I know, like to often like pick up viewer decks and things like that, but it's been a little bit tough in the Warlock meta.
Absolutely. A lot of my content revolves around viewer decks. It's probably one of the best ways I've found to drive engagement and interaction with your chat. And if you're a streamer starting out, like that's a huge thing, right? So recently, like viewer decks are usually like playable but really suspicious at best, or are just straight top tier net decks sometimes. Like you get a huge variety, some people being really really creative, like you see all kinds of things, but some, like my win rates normally would be around 50%. Like you could do it and maintain your rank if you're into that. After United and Stormwind, it just became impossible, right? Most of those decks could not compete on a fundamental level with what people were doing in United and Stormwind, especially Warlock.
Yeah. Right,
so like, after queuing into 5 Warlocks in a row with like, with stuff like Dead Man's Hand Warrior with weird cards in it, or like a hunter deck that, like a questline hunter deck that plays a bunch of stuff that's unrelated to the questline, or the upteenth slow priest deck, right? Like you queue into a Warlock, you're like, well, that was fun, that was nice, cool, next.
Yeah, it's tough.
You lasted longer than I did. I actually I started scaling back in Dark Moon Fair because when I was doing viewer decks in Ashes of Outland, stuff still lost. Like not all the viewer decks were very high quality, but they usually at least got a chance to do what they were built to do, and then go down. And then like Darkler has been left unchecked for so long, and things like Mazaki and other fast stuff just crushes them, and trying to force viewer decks like for an extended period has been pretty rough for me. So I've been keeping it down to a week, and I have not even tried in United and Stormwind. Like I can't even play my own stuff in United and Stormwind.
Yeah, so what have you guys actually been playing? Just on that. And don't worry, you can admit that it's just a Warlock if it needs to be.
It hasn't quite been that bad for me.
No.
I'm curious about what Martian has to say about it. I know that like Martian did the Questline Druid, and I tried that deck myself. I was a big fan of it. And I'm eager to see what else, like if he's invented anything. I haven't invented anything myself, so.
I've had a few. So like the Questline Druid was the first one. That one was really fun. That one like saved my expansion experience. I was despairing from Warlock on day one, and then the Druid deck kind of like pushed me out of it. I also tried Odd Demon Hunter with the new Murloc. That thing is nuts. The 1 mana 1/2 taunt that gets +2/+2 if you played a Fell spell. You just coin that thing out with Mana Burn on turn 2, and then you're smacking them in the face with a 3/4, and they're so behind. I went like 14-4 in Highish Legend with that. That was pretty fun. Then Smork Priest, I think other people have had more success with than me, but at least it was fun. It felt competitive with everything.
Yeah, looking at what else has been, competitive, we have actually been able to get some information about some of the early stuff, about what's been winning, because we had a tweet go out by Tian Ding. They are a data scientist at Blizzard, so they're basically in charge of all the stats stuff or the win rate stuff. Whenever you see Ixar tweeting out a whole bunch of like, hey, here are the best decks right now, this is who it's coming from behind the scenes. So they tweeted out the standard win rates, and then I thought I would ask, hey, how about some wild info? And Tien was, kind enough to oblige. So the tweet that he sent was, so from today's data, in wild, these decks are pretty good. Pirate Warrior, the aggro version, so not quest. Odd Druid with the quest line. Odd Rogue, Questline Giants Warlock, Aggro Paladin, which we assume is Tax Paladin, and Shadow Aggro Priest. So this is from a day of data. It's not necessarily in order. That wasn't specifically mentioned. It does look at it most likely looks at the top 1% of the player base, because that's what the standard win rates were. But yeah, there's a few surprising things in here, right? Like this tweet itself kind of got me to try things like Odd Rogue, got me to revisit the Pirate Warrior without the quest. So it was really nice to get this kind of information from Blizz.
I was quite shocked to see it myself when you showed me just before the show. Like, I clicked that follow button basically instantly on that guy's Twitter. It's awesome to see. Like, we kind of scrape and scrounge for data as it is, and we make a lot of assumptions when we make judgments about this format, so the more data we can get, the better. It's great.
It's cool seeing Odd Druid as one of the highest win rate decks.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we all predicted before the expansion came out, right? We all thought Odd Druid was going to be right up there.
Yeah, there's a dude in my chat that has tried to give me Odd Druid as a viewer deck probably a dozen times, and I'm just thinking about some of these, I'm thinking about some of these archetypes, right? Like Odd Druid, I've played Odd Druid before this, and the deck was not good, but it was it didn't have quest line, it didn't have any kind of power. It's kind of exciting to see, honestly, that stuff like that can evolve. I mean, even you can find love even in a Warlock meta,
Apparently, yeah.
It felt half decent when it had 7 mana Guardian Animals.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. It got me to pick up some decks. There was a couple missing. There was the Questline Druid, the normal version, which I think is also very strong. But again, we don't know exactly what the best versions of decks could be, and sometimes some different archetypes have different levels of unrefinement, and some other decks are much more refined, and so that can definitely affect the overall win rates, especially very early in an expansion. It's something that we're currently seeing in Standard, where Quest Warlock, the really good builds of Quest Warlock are really good, but the overall archetype win rate is dumpster tier, or at least it was a few days ago. So yeah, it's a pleasant surprise. I always really appreciate information like this, because sometimes when you are just repeatedly queuing up into Warlock or whatever the best deck is, sometimes it is easy to sort of lose scope of the bigger picture and see that there are actually, some gems, some underplayed things that are actually really quite good. And that can definitely be missed, I think. So yeah, really good to get that info there from Tian. Now, Keith, speaking of info and meta report stuff, you guys did the Tempo Storm report. That was out, I think, was that the 3rd or the 4th day of the expansion? It was pretty early, right?
It was pretty early. I forgot to mention that when I introduced myself, by the way. But yeah, I'm a member of the Tempo Storm Wild Hearthstone meta team. So, we released a product very like a few days after the expansion. Basically, we met up 2 days after the expansion and released it, I think, 5 days after the expansion. And then we have another one that's going to be put out either this weekend or like Monday.
Oh, well,
So-
exclusive. Yeah, exclusive announcement
Well,
leaks.
Yeah, so we normally don't do it as that fast, but like the meta really like locked in and coalesced very quickly. And we also like had a change in our schedule because of a few different factors where we had to wait a week and then jump forward a week. So we're trying to get back to our normal schedule. So yeah, like this is more of a return to the normal normal timeline, if anything else. But yeah, that means that you're gonna get your Tempo Storm Wild Wild Hearthstone meta fix faster than you normally would.
Yeah, I was going to ask about, with the report coming out so early in the expansion, what has basically changed, right? What do you think has, flipped compared to what the initial view was from that first report? Because obviously, when it's only out for a few days, then your opinion can change very quickly after that.
Yeah.
But I guess if you guys are dropping another report, maybe we don't leak too much. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't. So I can say a few things without leaking anything. Like
Sure.
when you make a report like ours very quickly after an expansion launches, like you're working with a very small amount of experience and data relative to what you normally have. So you make you're very generous with some of your judgments. You make a lot of assumptions, and some decks seem to be much better than they are. Some decks don't seem to be very, very good. And don't appear at all, and like things like that, right? Like, so you can expect the next report to be a lot like closer in accuracy to what you're actually experiencing now, and to reflect the changes that have happened since then, right? Like you're not going to see you're going to see a much different looking upper tiers and lower tiers kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was basically just thinking about, the types of decks that have, fallen off a little bit from those first few days of hype. And again, like, without getting specific leaks from the Tempo Storm stuff, an example... Yeah, I know, I'm trying to work for it. An example that I was thinking of was, like, Odd Hunter, right? Where Odd Hunter initially felt super good, and was like Hunter was one of the most played classes. It was like the second or third most played class in the format over the first week or so. I think that, or the first few days, and I think that's an example of a deck where we get about 10 days in, where I'm seeing so much less of that, for example, and maybe that's because of the questline druids and things like that. Maybe that's like a reason why it's been pushed back a lot.
Odd Hunter seems pretty fragile to me. I had people in my chat like as recently as a couple days ago complaining about how oppressive it felt, and I don't see it at all. Like it felt like it might be pretty good for the first couple of days, but it seems like something that's kind of half decent right now.
It felt really good in the context of the early meta because it's very strong against board-centric aggro. Mm-hmm. Like you can just mow down their minions, and then you have a win condition, you have an upgraded hero power, you can just keep shooting them, or you can keep their board at bay. But in a world of Warlocks, like it even seemed good against the Warlock decks at first, right?
Yeah.
Because you could go face, but it turns out you're not really as fast as you need to be to consistently do that. And a lot of the cards in that deck counterintuitively were counterproductive. Like things like Toxic Reinforcements, for instance. If you're an Odd Hunter and you play Toxic Reinforcements and you complete it, and your opponent plays Blightborn Tamsin, then you take the damage. Or you complete Toxic Reinforcements and you advance their quest a tick, and then they beam you for 3, they gain 3 life, and they didn't have to spend any cards to do any of that. And you're just like, well, I guess we're back to the drawing board. Except there aren't too many other ways to go with Questline Hunter, right? Like there are only so many spells in Hunter that can deal damage. Most of them that you would be able to fit in a deck with Baku's Moon Eater have already been are already spoken for, like your wound praise and your rapid fires and stuff like that. Like there's nothing else there that you can shove in. So everything else that you would use to fill the gaps doesn't really fit what the deck's trying to do, right? Like you're either like discovering cards randomly, or you're trying to like stall somebody with like Glacial Shard or something, but it doesn't really mesh, right? So it might be a thing where the archetype fleshes out in the future when you can add more cards, but for right now it's like, okay, well, it does a couple of things really well, and then everything else like in the context of everything else going on, it's not really that great.
It does feel like it's a couple damaging spells away from being nutty. Like, if you get those hands with Rapid Fire and like any of the Wound Praise or whatever the other one is, the bad Wound Prey, it feels unstoppable. But then you hit your like Double Flare, Power Shot, Unleash the Hound's Hand, and you lose.
Yeah, something spicy that I saw was Auction Master Beardo. And I was like, oh, but it's so bad after you actually like complete the quest, right? Because it doesn't do anything. But then it was like, well, but you don't actually need to complete the quest because it's just it's just the quest reward basically.
There was a card from Witchwood that I saw somebody play, another 3/4 that refreshes your hero power. I forget what it's called.
Oh, Blackwater Pixie?
Pixie.
I think.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. So maybe there's some more room to work with in Odd Hunter, but I don't know. I definitely agree with you though that it probably wouldn't take that much to tip it over the edge a little bit. Like it is those hands where they're good hands, they're really good. So yeah,
absolutely.
So the Odd Hunter was definitely a surprise. I feel like before diving into any more, like nerfs kind of type of conversation, I feel like we should just like pause for a moment and just say what has been the overall biggest surprise for you guys, considering the expansion, the meta, because like I said, the expansion has been a surprise. But what have been the actual like super clear standouts in terms of things that have kind of caught you off guard, whether it's a card or an archetype or whatever? There's things you think you're wrong about, in particular.
I was easily the most wrong about the quest ending up in regular Dark Lair, and to a lesser extent the pirate quest ending up in Pirate Warrior. Like, apparently it's not as good as without it, which is not surprising. But I was only thinking about the reward when I thought about, does this belong in this archetype? And Lightborn Tamsin in regular Dark Lair feels like you're just running Zephyrus or Stone Tusk Boar or something else silly. But if you think about it alongside the initial part, where it's the 1-mana Fireball that discounts your Flesh Giant twice, it gets a lot better. And in the Pirate Quest, it tutors your Ankar and then shoots your opponent in the face for 4, or clears their board or something. So, like, they made a lot more sense in the aggro tempo type archetypes than I was expecting.
I have a lot of surprises on my end myself. Like when I did a tier list with my chat on one of my streams about where cards would land. So I have a really spicy and ugly looking tier list based on that, right? We didn't identify as anything as tier S. A handful of tier 1 cards, a few of them actually are seeing play, and then some like B-level cards. But you want to know where Demon Seed is on that list?
Go for it, shoot.
It is a rank C. Rank C is meme playable.
Yeah, so you guys were a little higher on it than I was. Apparently.
You were just like, nah, this isn't playable at all.
Yeah, I'm like, nah, this isn't the thing. Like, Wen's never gonna want this. It's exclusively, it has to be worse than normal glare. Don't want this. It's like a Mechathune type effect. Nah, no shot. Definitely don't want it.
May not have realized that it gives you the ability to put 6 cost Flesh Giants in your deck rather than 8 cost Flesh Giants.
That's definitely a big upgrade. I have enjoyed the Happy Ghoul tech in Dark Lair, by the way.
That Happy Ghoul. I remember like Heal Zoo. Y'all remember that?
Yeah.
Old good times.
Standard deck that was just like really old school Zoo, but with all these weird quirky healing cards, just so you can make your Light Wardens and your Happy Ghouls work and just hit them for a lot. It was Like it's kind of a blast of the past, and like just looking at Happy Ghoul, right? Like he's so happy. Just look at him.
I was bored to tears of Dark Lair. I never wanted to play the deck again. I've played it way too much since it came out, but then I played the version that had Happy Ghoul in it, and suddenly it's a brand new deck to me. I don't know why.
Yeah, I enjoy. I love the toxic Raise Dead Happy Ghoul plays, or at least I love it when I'm doing them. But you know, Raise Deading into a Happy Ghoul or two and just like throwing them down for 0 is pretty disgusting.
So like, I think everyone rated Cornelius Room very high, right?
Yep.
Relatively speaking, and that card is literally unplayable in this meta. Like in the old meta where you could play like things like Reno's first Mutanus, and like you could eventually get to turn 10 and do things, you know, or at the very least get to turn 9 when someone would Raza Anduin you. Like you could theoretically play a 6-drop that draws you 4 cards, but in this meta, if you're playing a 6-drop that doesn't kill them or deal with their board, you're dead. Right?
Yeah.
So no Cornelius is kind of it's a real sag. Dark Bishop Benedictus being better than I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there being a Shadow Priest and an Aggro Priest deck to begin with.
A Pirate Priest.
Pirate Priest.
No kidding. That's a meme that I played too.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started, man.
Pirate Priest is real now.
It's good now.
Yeah.
There was Moarg Forge Fiend, the 8-mana 8/8 taunt death rattle gain 8 armor guy that my chat was really high on. Like they wanted to rate that thing A tier because they thought that would be the second coming of Q Block.
Yep.
Imagine playing Q Block in United Stormwind meta.
Yeah. Reno Jackson, currently seeing play in 3% of wild decks in the past week at Legend. So that's not really a number that I ever thought that I would see for Reno.
Neither of you guys are Reno fans, right?
Not really, but like,
I have kind of Reno Stockholm syndrome, right? Like, it really depends on whether or not I'm the one playing Reno.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm the one playing Reno, Reno's great. If I'm not the one playing Reno, screw Reno. like stay the hell away from my game, Mustache Man. Get out of here.
So Corbett, was it worth the cost?
I really don't think so.
Were you the one that did this? Did you wish him a monkey's paw?
Yeah, I put Reno on the ban list. It happened. So yeah, that's kind of a shocking number, and it really does speak volumes to how the format has changed so absurdly, right? Like, this is insane. It's funny you mentioned the reason I was thinking about Reno is because you mentioned Rome, the Cornelius Rome, and how you said a lot of people were so high on it. I was one of those people. I had it in like 15 theory crafts, and in hindsight, it's like, what the hell were you thinking? You thought we were going to make it to turn 6? Like, you thought we were going to turn 8, I guess? I don't know.
It's really hard to predict what a meta is going to look like when you're adding cards that you've never played with.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever anyone does like a card review, and this is not to knock anyone doing card reviews, right? Like it's really hard to do them well and to have accurate predictions. Like card reviews in a lot of ways are basically just crapshoots for content.
They really are. Like there can be a lot of benefit from just like teaching players how to evaluate cards and to how to think about cards, and sort of like, even for your own benefit, trying to get better at card predictions and meta predictions. But it's a crapshoot a lot of the time, you know, like we don't know what we don't know, so
yeah.
They're fun to talk about. Like I like doing it with chat, especially just like talking through how a card might be used. I find out a lot of stuff that way. I used to, before I was ever streaming, I used to like binge everyone that I could find whenever there was a new set coming out. I used to listen to all of them. So
yeah.
It's fun to think about, but I never think like, you know, my predictions are going to be completely correct, or the person that I'm looking at, their predictions are going to be completely correct. I think every time people love to bring up that Trump rated Defile at 1 star, and it's like, by his parameters, it's kind of true, actually.
Sacrifice 5 stars.
Yep.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, that comes up at least once or twice a week in my chat, actually.
Yep.
Well, we all thought that the quest hunter from Angora was going to break the game, and that was super trash. So.
Oh yeah. How about Corridor Creeper? How literally no one saw
Nobody
that card
talked about
coming.
it.
Yeah, like, and then like it ended up literally breaking the game.
Yeah, they hit that one in the card dump, in the Facebook dump. So
Yeah, they snuck it in.
yeah, that's how they'll get you. They try to get you not to think about a card, and then they just they put the OP one there. Okay, so we've kind of talked a lot about the meta and talked a lot about Dark Lair and things like that. And don't worry, there's a patch coming, but we don't know what it's for. So Alec Dawson, one of the devs, one of the leads, said that there will be no constructed balance changes this week. Target is early next week. And, I guess that means by the week that you're listening to this. Meta has been evolving quite rapidly since the United Stormwind launched and will be finalizing decisions in a few days. So Alex sent this tweet on the 11th. So they've kind of talked it over. There'll probably be notes going out on Monday and then a patch going out on Tuesday, we assume. So I guess the first thing is, like, we have to assume that... Okay, I guess how do we want to take this? Because we need it addressed in Wild, right? We need, like, Warlock addressed, no matter what that is. So, one, if there isn't a nerf to a card that necessarily affects Wild that much, if Warlock isn't touched in Wild, what do you think the solution is? Or what do you think the most likely solution is, full stop, for the current Warlock issue? And I guess more broadly, we can get into a conversation about nerfs in Wild in general, because it does feel like every expansion things kind of break a little bit, and whether these constant nerfs are warranted, and what your opinions are on just nerfing Wild cards.
In general, like, I'm not a fan of, like, the pace at which they nerf cards in Standard. Like, if they did it that often for Wild, that would really devalue the format for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also not a fan of leaving Dark Lair up for as long as it's been. And I'm talking about Dark Lair the deck, not necessarily the card. As far as, like, what I'd nerf about Dark Lair, I don't even know at this point. Like, people hate to hear me talk about this, but I don't think that the Dark Lair card itself is the issue. I think that it's Kobold Librarian plus Raised Dead, Flesh Giant, and Broom. And I don't know that nerfing any one of those cards actually stops the deck, except maybe Broom. Because if you take Broom away, then Dark Lair just gets steamrolled by early aggro boards. But I do like Kobold Librarian to Death Rattle and then start banning other things. I don't know.
Yeah, it's so hard to talk about because it's always going to be through the context of Standard, right? Like, it's always going to be dependent on, like, are they doing nerfs in Standard, and do the nerfs happen to affect Wild? And then if they don't do a nerf in Standard, are they going to do a Wild exclusive nerf? So it's just such a tough thing to speculate on, right?
I actually have a lot to say about this topic, and I don't want to take up the entire the entire podcast about it. But I wrote a letter a few months back about my philosophy with Wild balance, and about how you should not treat Wild as like a stepsister format. Like, right now, it's just kind of it's there too kind of thing, and they don't really, like, they don't want to touch it unless something is, like, unless the house is burning down.
Yeah.
Right? Because whenever they do touch it, when the house is not burning down, you get things like Barnes to 5 or something, like something where you look at it and it's like, what? when they nerf Barnes, that was kind of my reaction to it. And, like, Martian has a very good point, right? Like, if you're just nerfing things all the time just for the sake of shaking up the meta, that kind of strips away what makes Wild, right? Like, Wild has its own flavor, its own identity, its own cadence compared to Standard, right? We don't want Wild to feel like Standard, but we also, or at least I speak for myself here, but I'm sure that you guys at least agree. You may agree with this to some degree, but we also don't want the format to devolve to complete degeneracy all the time. Like, and their current design philosophy suggests that expansion after expansion, it's going to do that. Like, we had Tiller with original Hysteria. We had Stealer Souls, which I am very shocked is a card that they made. Like, looking at that card, it's like, you do understand, like, I tweeted Ixar, like, this is the worst this is the worst interaction I've ever had with anyone at Blizzard ever. But I tweeted Ixar, I'm like, you know what this card does, right? This card makes infinite mana.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you want that to exist anywhere? And he's like, well, if it breaks, then we'll fix it. And I'm like, what if I don't want things to break in this constantly? What if I don't want to have to worry about a new expansion drops? What dumb, broken Warlock BS am I going to have to deal with? And then not just Warlock. I mean, but Warlock's kind of the low-hanging fruit here, right? Like, you don't have to make cards that generate infinite mana and do things too. Like, you don't have to have like 0 mana Raise Dead. You don't have to have like 1 mana Pyroblasts and stuff like that. You don't have to do that to make an engaging standard format. Your format's standard's probably better if you don't push in that direction. Not to mention wild, right? Like, I think that like if they had like a forward-thinking philosophy about what happens with these cards after an initial standard format, like they probably do, but their philosophy about where the game is headed is probably much different than where I think the game should head or where anyone thinks the game should head, right? Like, I don't speak from a position of, like, my perspective is relatively ignorant and mostly powerless compared to someone that develops the game, right? Like, I, relatively speaking, don't really know what the best way to is to, you know, further the format in a way that I think is conducive to making Hearthstone a game that will last decades, right? Like, we've seen games like Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, like, and like other card games like it. Like, if you want to continue the card game paradigm, you could literally make this game last forever if you do it right. Mm-hmm. But you have to have you have to have a design sense to want to make the game to last forever, right? Like, if you power creep the game too far and you burn everything to the ground, then you remove all of that legacy. Like, I saw it done with Yu-Gi-Oh. I used to be very involved in that in that community, in that environment, right? And that game changed considerably over the span of a decade to where it's completely unrecognizable, much different. And if I had seen it when I was getting into games in its current state now, I wouldn't have anything to do with it. Mm-hmm. But it's a very passionate topic. Anyone that cares about this topic is going to be very passionate about it, but I don't know what the real answer is, right? Like, I can tell you some things that would fix the format in the short term, right? Like, they introduced a ban list with Stealer Souls. I don't think that we should have to continue adding cards expansion after expansion to this ban list, but it's probably the most elegant solution to the problem we have now, right? Like, you ban Demon Seed or you ban Dark Lair, you ban both, and that makes it so that they don't have to neuter anything in standard just for the sake of our format. But at the same time, I'd prefer that they didn't have to do that time after time. But
I like it as a temporary tool. I actually like it as a lot as a temporary tool. I would use it a bit more. I would even put Counterspell on the ban list personally, as long as it's in standard, because I feel like, for me, Secret Mage is not that powerful of a deck. It's a strong deck. It's a good deck, but it's not like crushingly powerful to where it needs a nerf. But it obviously not right now. You can't play Secret Mage right now. But on average, on the average day of Hearthstone, Secret Mage is ruining the experience for a lot of people on their way to Legend. And I think that the problem with that is you don't get to actually play your cards in response to anything that the Secret Mage does. So, like, the problems with that are Counterspell and Explosive Runes. So, like, I would want to put, like, things like Counterspell on the ban list until they rotate to Wild, and then have some change to where it, like, refunds the mana of the spell it countered or something like that. But yeah, like, as a temporary solution, I love the ban list. I don't want to start banning, like, Wild exclusive cards or anything.
Okay. There's a lot to unpack there. From both the things you guys are saying. First one, Keith. You know, the idea of the standard format and them kind of like really pushing the cards that they design, right? Like, they're taking risky decisions constantly, right? As an example with Stealer of Souls. And so I definitely like feel what you're saying about, you know, the fear about, oh, I shouldn't have to be worried the game's going to completely break every single expansion.
Yeah.
But I also understand them wanting to make risky decisions, right? Like they want to be risky and sort of push things to the boundary, especially with a very fast nerf philosophy. But like you guys are saying, you personally aren't really on board for like super quick nerfing, or at least Martian said that he wasn't.
Right. Like I think there's a balance that you could strike, right? Like I agree with you. Believe it or not, despite what I've said for the past 5 minutes, I agree with you in the sense that they do need to have a design philosophy where they're not afraid to take risks, right? So they can design cool cards, stuff like that, touch on things they haven't done before, and kind of push the space, right? I do think that there's certain fundamental things that tend to go too far in card games that you can probably take it a little easier on. I think probably the easiest example of this off the top of my head is Raise Dead. Mm-hmm. So like Raise Dead's a 0 mana card. So 0 mana cards have to have, like, just in general, if you make a 0 mana card, that's 0 mana by itself, it has to do relatively little, right? Because you're not spending anything other than the card itself to get what you get, right? So on the face of it, like, just retail value of Raise Dead is you're drawing 2 minions that have already died. So 2 minions you probably want, and you're taking 3 damage. So normally the assumption is you don't care about taking damage. Like, that's a cost. It really isn't, but so you're functionally spending you're functionally drawing 2 cards for 0 mana. Let's take the damage out of the way, right? You're drawing 2 cards that you would want to draw, or like want to have access to, for 0 mana. You compare that to other cards that exist in the game, like the normal going rate for that is 2 mana, sometimes 3, right? Like you see it with like Research Project, you see it with Ice Fishing, you see it with Arcane Intellect. I think that's kind of where they were going with the original Refreshing Springwater, right? Like the idea was probably in an average deck, you would spend the 4 mana, draw one spell, 1 minion, and then get a refresh of 2 mana, so you would have 2 mana, right? Like if you're not like assuming that people are going to build 30 spell decks or 28 spell decks, then Refreshing Spring Mana seems perfectly fair, right? But Raise Dead costing 0 mana means that, like, when other classes are spending 2 mana, when the Shaman's spending 2 mana to draw Flurgle Toxfin, you're spending 0 mana to get back Cobalt Librarian Darklair. And so they pay that mana, they blow up your board, you rebuild, you destroy their things, and you still have your things. And what do they have, right? You didn't actually have to sacrifice any tempo, and by tempo I mean like development of any kind, to get what you needed to get, right? And that's just assuming that Raise Dead is a 0 mana draw 2. Right, just like original First Day of School was a 0 mana draw 2, but to a slightly weaker extent, right? But what if we factor in the damage, right? So you have a card like Darklair, which says every time you take damage, you get a benefit. In this case, mana, right? So Raise Dead, 0 mana, gain a mana, draw 2 cards. That if you made that card with what it actually does, and you like compared it to any other card like it in Hearthstone, you can tell that this card is really outside of the realm of a reasonable rate as far as mana goes, but yet the card exists, right? And that's not just gaining mana. Like, there are other benefits that you have with Raise Dead when it comes to like damage. Like Warlock can get other benefits. Like there's a minion, for instance, an 8 mana dragon or something that makes another dragon whenever you take damage. Like, that's an example. You have a 3 mana minion that 4-mana minion makes 3-mana minions whenever you take damage. Like, there are some cards that see some really niche play that work off of this damage principle. But regardless, dealing damage to yourself in that class in many contexts is a benefit. And you're not paying any mana to get that benefit. So you're not like, it's okay for that card to exist. It's not okay for it to be 0 mana. That's kind of, that's an example of like something where I think it might have gotten away from them, right? Like, I don't know what kind of design space a 0 mana Raise Dead is supposed to open up that doesn't involve doing a bunch of things you shouldn't be able to do in a card game, right?
I don't play enough Standard to know. How has Raise Dead been in Standard the past year?
It's been it was relatively weak in the Control Priest. Even though the Control Priest was very strong and defining a top legend, it wasn't that great there. In other Warlock decks, Warlock was dead for a very long time in Standard, right? And so, ever since the Dark Lair nerf, Dark Lair Warlock decks in Standard kind of dropped off. So it hasn't really been a particularly big offender in that format. Yeah.
From like a wild perspective, I agree completely. Raise Dead is busted. If it's not Kobold Librarian, it's Raise Dead. That's the best card in the Dark Lair deck, I think. But like, these cards are designed for Standard, and that's why the ban list is so handy, because they want to design for Standard, and when things like Raise Dead are just so nutty and wild, they can be just temporarily banned, and let Wild still be a place where you can play more than just a couple of decks.
Yeah, because like we're talking about, Keith is sort of talking about these big, fundamental issues, right? These like patterns, like these problems that keep coming up, and whether Warlock cops a nerf this expansion, that's not really going to change the long-term issues, right? When we're talking about Hearthstone being a decade-long game, which it definitely can be. This is a great structure, and it's a great game, and definitely has a long life ahead of it potentially. And so it is such a complicated issue, though, right? Like, the way the format is positioned now, if Warlock is nerfed in some capacity, whether they put Flesh Giant to 10 mana, for example, that would be a potential nerf that fixes some issues in Standard, and maybe that slows down Warlock a lot in Wild. I don't think that, the format is going to go back to being highly Reno-centric. I feel like this expansion, even if it's not Dark Lair specifically, the Quest Warlock specifically, I really feel like this expansion has sort of been a tipping point in terms of how fast everything is, and how aggressive, and how many resources a lot of these decks have, whether it's like Quest Pirate Warrior, or Odd Hunter, or even, like the Odd Druid, the Questline Druid. It just feels like there's a lot going on right now, and the format has just fundamentally sped up to the point where even if Warlock is nerfed, I'm not sure it's going to look familiar to what people are used to playing for the past year or so. Yeah, maybe you guys disagree on that.
Assuming Warlock isn't a class for this example, do you think like Smork Priest and Questline Druid and Raza Hunter survive a like Reno Dirty Rat heavy environment?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, right? Like, I think those decks that are generally pushed out by more board-centric stuff like Pirate Warrior, or maybe like Odd Paladin, for example, might be good into Odd Hunter, I'm not sure. But are the Reno decks going to come back anyway, right? Like, I think like a deck like Odd Hunter is probably very good into something like Reno Priest, I imagine. It's hard to say because I haven't actually seen a Reno Priest in what feels like a decade, so, I haven't really gotten a great feel on those matchups.
There's a term for this, and I'm kind of blanking on it, but like the I guess the average turn that the game ends in Hearthstone.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like Hearthstone, I think in Wild has been normally a turn 5 to turn 9 kind of format. That's a lot of range, a lot of variance, right? But say like an average somewhere around 7.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that covers all the aggro decks that want to kill you on turn 4, to the like decks like Odd Paladin that want to play cards like Quartermaster that can kill you around turn 6, turn 7, to the Reno decks and the control decks and the Dead Man's Hand decks that want to take the game even further than that, right? So if right now there's a force that pushes that key turn way down.
Yeah.
And it's the Demon Seed, right? Because they do the thing, turn 5, nothing you do for the rest of the game matters if you're an attrition deck. Right? So if you want to compete with the Demon Seed, you can't beat them after turn 5. You have to beat them before that. Or like around turn 6, and hopefully they didn't get everything they needed, right? So that drives, on a fundamental level, that drives the key end turn of the format down from like being able to play like 7, 8, 9, 10 to 20 turn games, like way down to playing games that last much less than that. So like a card like Reno is a very powerful card, but Reno costs 6 mana. There's no way to make it any cheaper. That doesn't involve going through a lot of other hoops, right? So if you can make Hearthstone a game, if you remove the pressure that drives that key turn down to where it is right now, which is around turn 5, if you can remove that pressure and that average creeps up, Reno will come back. Absolutely. The same thing with Zephyr, same thing with Lothep, same thing with like all the other things that we've seen disappear, right? Like you start to see like the late game Warlocks come back, Butanists come back, Shamans come back, mid-range decks come back. Like Wailing Caverns meta. All the things that made the Wailing Caverns meta didn't disappear exactly. They just couldn't compete with that turn 5 limit. Right. If you can notch that up a few degrees, then the meta opens up considerably. That's my view on it, at least.
There has been one benefit of the Demon Seed, in my opinion. I don't think I've faced a Celestial Alignment deck even once since the expansion came out.
Oh yeah, I forgot that card existed.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't like it either. I don't like it, but I kind of made my peace with it when I realized, you know what? You can challenge that deck, and there are a few ways that you can attack Celestial Alignment if that's something you really want to do, and it doesn't mean that you can't beat other decks too, right? Like, so if Celestial Alignment became a really strong thing, you just hate it out.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's stuff like, like Celestial Alignment is one of those like inevitable type things where you have to beat them by a certain point, and I think that's maybe what Corbett was talking about with how even if the Demon Seed isn't around, there's the format's not going to go back to looking how it was. Like with the quests, maybe some more classes have their own Celestial Alignment where you've only got a certain amount of time to get there before they get you. I just don't know that like Demon Seed feels like the only one that's a hard stop, like the other ones feel like I could Reno against a Raza Hunter and maybe they get me back down to like 10 and then I could raise that Reno and do it again, maybe.
Yeah, but I think you can very easily beat that Hunter deck with a Reno deck if you existed in a vacuum where those are the only 2 decks, right? Like, I don't think that would be that difficult.
Yeah, I think Dirty Rats starting to come back would maybe make life hard for some of the quest decks. Unless like everyone perfectly times it so that you only complete the quest the turn you can play your quest reward.
Yeah. What do you think about the Warrior quest in that context? Because I'm thinking, like, Juggernaut is really hard to beat. Like, if you just stuck the Juggernaut in Wailing Caverns meta with nothing else from United and Stormwind and no other context, I think that card would really throw a wrench in the works just by itself.
Yeah, I feel like that card by itself sort of solves Pirate Warrior's issue with Reno Priest. I feel like it might still lose to something like Reno Warlock, because even with the Juggernaut, there are probably still big issues with, 20 mana worth of demons summoned on turn 8 potentially. If you're playing like Willow or something like that. So yeah, I feel like that's an example of the kind of inevitability that I was thinking about, and Odd Hunter's another one sort of thing. Even the mages, right? Even like Ignite mages and things like that that have been popping up. That deck's gross, by the way. The animation time on that is disgusting. So, I don't know, things like that is more what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about whether a nerf to Warlock it doesn't fundamentally fix the format, right? Like, it doesn't fundamentally fix the format, but it doesn't have to. You know, like, it doesn't have to be the greatest perfect fix ever to just make things better and improved.
Absolutely.
I think that's the big thing, right? Where a lot of times when people are talking about nerfs in WoW, they're looking for this solution that apparently fixes the format and makes it absolutely perfect. But it doesn't have to be that just to make it improved, you know?
I would like to see a world where like where there are a wide variety of viable strategies, and the people that want to play this format have the ability to play it in as close to a way that they want to play it as possible, right? Like, not everyone should have to worry about what a tier list looks like. Wild has this very cool aspect of it where you can, like, at low elo, if you're into jank, it's a paradise. Right? Like, I've played a lot of low elo Hearthstone recently, leveling up a free-to-play account, and you run into all kinds of really cool things. They explode when you play Dark Glare against them, but they're cool. I'd love to see what those things do, and if you care about more than just your opponent's hero portrait exploding, then you should be able to explore that. I don't think you should have to, like, be condemned to, like, low elo to be able to do that, though, right? Like, you should be able to explore at reasonably high levels. Right now, at high level, you can't. There's nothing to explore. Like, it's Warlock, the things that beat Warlock, and there you go.
Yeah, I think you need to be able to play a tempo deck or a value deck or a combo deck. Maybe not to the top tier, but like each of those types of gameplay should be represented to some degree.
Yeah, like, I guess my pushback on that would be that I feel like there's always going to be this, because there is always going to be a best deck. I feel like even if something gets nerfed, I don't necessarily know if that space opens up. It's kind of the concern that I was having earlier when I was wondering whether Reno decks even come back. I mean, maybe they do. Like, exactly, maybe they do. But I don't know if, like, Warlock necessarily getting nerfed fixes that. I definitely hear what you're saying about, you know, ideally players can play a variety of decks, but that's just not the kind of curated experience they're kind of going with right now in Wild, and it seems to be the philosophy that they have for now, right? They're very hands-off unless things are burning down to the ground, and we'll have to see if that ever really changes, because, you know, things have gotten bad.
This is pretty bad.
Yeah.
I think they've stepped in when things have gotten this bad before. I would expect something.
Yeah, I think that this is an example where, like, I even floated out that the idea of, you know, maybe they just ban Dark Glare. If they're not going to do something for Standard, it's very likely that a Warlock nerf in Standard affects Wild. This would be an example where I think, like, some sort of ban would be completely warranted, just because it is that extreme. Like, I don't say that very lightly, because, you know, I think bans should be very, like, personally, Martian, you've said that you wish they made more use of it, which I totally understand. But I think generally, based on the precedents that they've set, bans should be used very exclusively, and I think that the current situation would definitely warrant one.
No questions asked. What's your balance change? Go.
I don't know. I don't know. That's the thing, because, like, if the nerfing had been going on for years, you know, like every expansion they nerf something in Wild, I feel like it would be a very clean solution, right? Like, we could just, like, fix the problems one by one, we could curate it, but the problem is that it hasn't been like that. Like, everything's just been sort of, like, hands off.
I'm not asking you to be a pragmatist. I'm at, like Corbett, somewhere deep down in your heart, you wish for something. Like, you have a certain wish. I'm asking you to share with us what that wish is. Whatever that wish is.
All right, let's butcher like 20 cards. Like, let's just cut back, like, Reno 7, Zeph to 3, Kabalaki to 2. Like that's the ideal way for me to do it, is to just, like, butcher everything. But again, I know that's not, you know, realistic.
Sweet. Yeah. This is going to shock you then. I would ban Demon Seed, no other changes.
Really? In your ideal situation, yeah.
As things stand right now, ban Demon Seed, no other changes. I have a rationalization for that, right? So let's assume that Wailing Caverns meta was close to ideal. As close to ideal as we've probably had it in a while, right?
Alignment druids making Martian squirm a little.
Sure. Like, we can, like maybe we make Celestial Alignment cost infinite or something. Like I don't know. Wailing Caverns was relatively close to what we would assume an ideal situation in Wild is, right? Like if you ban Demon Seed, you take away that turn 5 hard limit for like decks having to beat Warlock faster than that, right? So like if you take away that turn 5 hard limit, the aggro decks that were focused on beating like Dark Lair is still going to exist in this environment, right? But Dark Lair doesn't have Demon Seed, and there's no Demon Seed combo without Giants, right? So you just have the OG Giants deck, where like only decent players could play that deck and get the kind of results that you saw with it, that like you would see with like top 10 Legend or whatever, right? So if you have that, then all of the decks that were able to beat Dark Lair without the Demon Seed are like those counter decks can fight Dark Lair again. So if Dark Lair surges up, then those decks that we already know exist can surge back in, right? So like that one isolated thing can inspire like Dark Lair to take a break a little bit. It will still exist, but it'll kind of take a break because you can like you can blow up all its stuff with a Barov Broom or Barov Skipper or Toxfin, Fleur Romancer or whatever. Like you can beat that deck, and then the decks that beat that deck are now like players. So what beats those decks? Like the hard aggro decks can get beat by mid-range aggro, get beat by control. This is the way that Reno becomes more relevant, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like those decks start to flood back in, and then those decks have to compete with the new stuff that we got from United and Stormwind, like the good stuff, like the new Hunter decks, the Aggro Priest, the Shaman Quest, Questline Druid. Like Questline Druid might still exist in this environment where Dark Lair's less relevant, but might not. And like you all of a sudden see all of this flux of stuff start to come back in, right? And if the format coalesces around something else that's just completely, if we find something else is completely degenerate, then maybe we reassess. Or like it turns out Dark Lair is still like Omega OP and somehow even easier to play than it was before in Wailing Caverns meta, like you can reassess, right? But I think that right now there like are a very small number of things that apply a pressure to the format, and if you release that pressure, a ton of stuff comes flooding back in, right? Like it's not a perfect solution.
I think that you're right that like a lot of stuff, just in the absence of Demon Seed, a lot of stuff becomes at least like you can play it and expect it to do at least some of its thing before it loses to something like Dark Lair. But like my experience playing against Dark Lair was basically I could play something that hard counters it, like Odd Demon Hunter, and then I lose to literally everything else. Or I could play the one thing that I feel like is kind of competitive with it, which is Raza Priest because of Wave of Apathy. But then like if the game goes on long enough and I have to leave a tour guide up at some point, that thing becomes a 17-17 Wind Fury tour guide and smacks me from whatever total I was at. I just like the Demon Seed solution, like if that wasn't around, that would definitely open up the format a lot because of that hard limit that you're talking about. But Dark Lair is a problem that has already had a lot of fatigue. Like my channel has changed dramatically just because of that one deck. And I don't think that like going back to how things were before is at least good enough for me.
Okay. So what is your ideal change?
Kobold Librarian to Death Rattle, maybe ban Dark Lair, Flesh Giant to 10, Raise Dead to 2, Broomstick to 3, or to be a warrior only card.
We're doing all these changes, by the way, at once, right?
Changes, yeah. Sorcerer's Apprentice to 5, Counterspell to refund its mana. I mean, like, really, if you're just gonna go, like, that's basically, I mean, like, Celestial Alignment to 11. But, like, if you make those changes, I'm a happy camper. But, like, if we're just talking about solving the Dark Lair problem, I think you have to pick 2 cards and either ban or make them worse. And I'd probably go after Kobold, Librarian, and Raised Dead myself if I was allowed to pick a card for standard. But otherwise, I guess just ban one and change Kobold, Librarian.
Yeah.
Solve the Dark Lair problem and let everything else kind of ride, and then if it needs more adjustment, you kind of tinker with it a little bit.
Yeah. That is to say, like, there's also the Demon Seed is this big, fancy, shiny new toy, and taking that away to put us back in the same pit we were in before, I don't think is ideal.
Do you have any final thoughts, guys? We've spent a lot of time here talking over the Warlock nerfs, which was expected, though, to be fair. Like, it's a big conversation.
Okay. No, I think I've said what I want to say. Like, if anyone wants to debate ban list stuff with me, they can always do so by, going to my channel and talking to me.
And Martian, where can the people find you?
So twitch.tv/MartianBuu. Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific to 3.
All right. Keith, do you want to redo that sellout one more time, just for the actual @
So I stream nightly at twitch.tv/Keith_numbers. If you go to that channel, hang out in my chat, follow me on socials, twitter.com/KeithNumbersHS. Yeah.
Awesome. So again, guys, sorry Keith to cut it off if you wanted to add something there, but
No, I'm just rambling at this point, I'm sure. I'll go back to the VOD or listen to the podcast, and I'll be just tell myself, scream at myself, just shut up, you idiot.
But guys, thank you both. Thank you both very much for coming on the show. Without, Mum and Dad were gone, so, I had to have a party here with you guys on the pod. So really appreciate it. Guys, of course, you can always find me at Corbettgames on Twitch and, Twitter and all that kind of good stuff. So again, thank you very much for listening to The State of Wild, and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye.
Hold on. No, don't end yet.
Oh,
Before we do, I gotta know. I gotta know. Which one's mom and which one's dad? You said mom and dad were gone. Which one's
Ruffle's dad, I think.
That vibes.
Yeah. And on that note, we'll see you guys next time.